Bona tarda a tothom. No puc deixar de començar expressant la satisfacció, la responsabilitat i l'honor immerescut que sento pel fet de presentar el senyor Sigmund Bauman, catedràtic emèrit de Sociologia de la Universitat de Varsòvia i també professor a les universitats de Leeds, Tel Aviv i London School of Economics. Si el dia que vaig tenir la sort de llegir el primer llibre de Bauman que va caure a les meves mans, la Pítia, coneguda sacerdotessa d'Apol·lo a Delfos, m'hagués vaticinat que arribaria el dia que seuria al seu costat per presentar-lo en un acte que clou un cicle que s'aplega sota el títol d'En Comú, m'hauria fet un fart de riure. I hauria pensat que l'oracle ja només s'equivoca de ple en els vaticinis sobre el nostre present, aquestes premonicions que sorgeixen del seu misteri, sinó que hauria pensat que els déus que parlen per boca seva tenen el dia de festa i volen riure's de mi. Però aquí estic, espantat per aquesta responsabilitat, però content d'haver-la assumit, sobretot per la proximitat amb el savi, a veure si alguna cosa se m'enganxa, i per la proximitat amb tots vostès que tenen un gran interès per reflexionar sobre l'educació en el temps que vivim. Els responsables d'aquesta sessió van proposar el meu nom i confio que sabien que fent-ho així escollien una persona que porta més de 40 anys fent de mestre i aquest és el seu mèrit principal, potser l'únic, que es tradueix en una experiència reflexionada i compartida i sotmesa cada dia a la prova de la vida a l'aula. Aquest aprenent de mestre sap perfectament que un dels privilegis dels deixebles és triar els seus mestres. Avui puc donar testimoni públic que el senyor Bauman és un dels meus mestres perquè m'ha obert portes, m'ha donat algunes respostes i, sobretot, perquè m'ha plantejat nous interrogants, mostrant-me que el coneixement no és semblant a una línia més o menys recta que ens cal saber seguir, sinó que tendeix a ser la figura de fang d'una criatura que et convida a interpretar-la i que es sorprèn per la novetat que mostra, per allò que insinua, per allò que amaga i que sempre inquieta per l'esforç que requereix incorporar el seu significat racional i emocional al teu món. Alguns dels llibres de Bauman són converses que construeixen el pensament en col·laboració. Qui conversa, escolta i fa l'esforç de situar-se en el punt de vista que exposa l'altre, de mirar i mirar-se amb els ulls del seu interlocutor. I aquest joc és sempre molt enriquidor. El llibre que avui presentem, sobre l'educació en un mundo líquido, és una mostra de la fecunditat d'aquestes converses, en aquest cas amb Riccardo Mazzeo. Vull manifestar que el meu interès per Bauman s'intensifica justament quan més impediments posa a la meva comprensió, quan m'obliga a exercir la tossuda i enriquidora i necessària activitat de la relectura. Aquesta activitat em recorda la veritat que expressa Faulkner quan compara la literatura a un llumí que encenem al vell mig d'un camp en plena nit. La seva llum amb prou feines il·lumina, però ens permet descobrir la foscor que hi ha al nostre voltant. Sort en tenim d'aquests llumins per veure quina és la situació del món i la nostra. Bauman no es dona la primera lectura. En reclama unes quantes més i en cada ocasió descobreixes un nou horitzó. És un gran creador de metàfores. La més coneguda és la de la modernitat líquida, que ha sabut estendre diferents camps del coneixement humà i ha sabut interpretar des de mirades complementàries o oposades, oferint un marc explicatiu de fenòmens diversos. Títols com Miedo líquido, Amor líquido o els reptes de l'educació en la modernitat líquida en són bons exemples. Una altra metàfora plena de lluminositat és parlar de la construcció europea a partir del rapte de la nimfa Europa a mans d'aquell déu que ara seria considerat un maltractador amb tots els ets i uts, així com les del temps puntillista o la dels míssils balístics davant dels míssils intel·ligents que li serveixen per descriure l'acció educativa. Ara bé, i tornem enrere, potser la imatge del món líquid i la seva fluïdesa ha estat la que s'ha estès a més camps del saber. Aquesta imatge té un riquíssim camp semàntic. Està emparentada amb verbs com vessar, desbordar, esquitxar, abocar, filtrar, regalimar, gotejar, inundar, ruixar, entre d'altres, que li ha permès parlar de política, sociologia, psicologia, economia, relacions humanes, història, ecologia, art, educació. I a través d'un seguit de paraules, a vegades de sentit contrari i d'altres complementari, ha teixit un joc de miralls que recull l'experiència humana i ha alzinat un pensament del que no podem prescindir. Parlo de paraules que quan les situem les unes al costat de les altres es creen tensions cognitives i emocionals que ens ajuden a entendre'ns i a entendre el món. En citaré algunes. Sort, destí, elecció, transitori durador precari, patriotisme-nacionalisme, dependència-alliberament, explicació-comprensió, jo l'altre, públic-privat, hospitalitat-rebuig, consum-producció, autonomia, llibertat, responsabilitat, estrany familiar, individu ciutadà, tradició, canvi, mixofília, mixofòbia, seguretat, llibertat, autonomia, sentit de pertinença. M'interessa també com a pensador que per il·lustrar les seves opinions, a més de la seva pròpia reflexió i de dels assagistes més destacats, creu que la ficció és una font de coneixement imprescindible i l'utilitza per parlar dels problemes del present i per singularitzar l'experiència humana, ja que un novel·lista o un poeta creen mons propis que donen testimoni de la nostra realitat i que ens fan mirar una mica més enllà i una mica més enrere. La ciència pot pretendre trobar a quina part del cervell fa niu el mal o l'amor. La literatura ens fa singulars aquestes dues realitats i ens mostra Lady Macbeth o Madame Bovary. El mateix fa amb el cinema. Entre d'altres, recordo que comenta pàgines de Calvino, Saramago, Proust, Kundera, Borges, Musil, Perec, Cervantes, Mickiewicz, Huxley, Carroll, Shakespeare, Sartre, Freud, Camus, Kafka, Pessoa, Plini, Orwell, els tràgics grecs, les mitologies i els contes populars, a més dels directors Robert Bresson, els germans Dardenne o l'actor Peter Sellers. Entrant de ple en el terreny de l'educació, Bauman m'ajuda a entendre que un educador és aquell que intenta acollir els seus alumnes sense condicions, que vol mostrar-los al món sense deixar res al tinter de la vida i que vol acompanyar-los en el procés del seu descobriment, amb l'esperança que arribin a fer un pas més en la construcció d'un projecte personal i col·lectiu i posar-lo al servei de les necessitats dels altres. Bauman, ho sabem prou bé, és un humanista, l'home que creu en el valor d'una ètica assistencial, que es deixa amarar per les reflexions de Levinas i la importància del rostre com a imatge de la singularitat humana i de la seva dignitat inviolable, que fa seves les paraules d'Albert Camus quan manifestava el desig d'habitar en un món on fos possible reivindicar la bellesa al costat de la condemna de la humiliació, paraules que haurien de convertir-se en un objectiu, potser dels més importants de qualsevol institució i de qualsevol acció educatives. Acceptar aquest principi ens planteja interrogants molt seriosos sobre les relacions entre mestre i deixeble i sobre el valor profund d'aquesta peculiar relació humana. Reivindico el Bauman que defensa que cal viure pels altres, l'home privat que convida a participar en la vida pública perquè sap que viure és com viure, i més ara, que estem immersos en temps convulsos on ens cal, seguint Calvino, reconèixer el que és infern i treure-li l'aire i donar consistència al cel. Sabem prou bé què és el mal, però no estem gaire convençuts de saber si podem definir què és el bé. El mal té una racionalitat i, per dir-ho amb les seves paraules, ser moral significa no sentir-se nunca lo suficientemente bueno. Les aportacions de Bauman ens ajuden a situar-nos en aquest terreny tan relliscós alhora que tan fonamental. Reivindico el Bauman compromès amb la humanitat, amb la seva sort i amb la seva desgràcia, que sap que sempre podem triar i que aquesta tria pot ser dolorosa. Per això ens és possible definir-nos com a éssers ètics o morals, que inscriu la seva reflexió entre la memòria i l'esperança. Un home que entén que la cultura és un procés per afavorir algunes classes d'eleccions per damunt d'unes altres, o fent seves les paraules de Santa Iana, entén que la cultura és com un ganivet que penetra en el futur. En una societat com l'actual, sotmesa al vertigen de la llibertat, dels canvis accelerats, estic tentat de desitjar-los un bon Nadal i un feliç any nou, en un moment històric que s'emmarca en una forta crisi econòmica que ens obliga a recordar el paper rellevant que té l'educació pública, l'educació per tothom, una educació que ha de ser un temps i un espai per estimar el coneixement i per assajar formes útils de convivència. Bauman ens convida a reflexionar sobre què és el que cal conservar, què és el que cal que perduri. Potser la novetat de la mirada infantil, aquesta capacitat d'estrenar el món, és el que s'assembla més a la pregunta sàvia del savi, que no acaba de donar-nos una resposta que ens satisfaci plenament. En aquest sentit, el savi seria un nen amb experiència. Bauman és un d'aquests nens que ens recorden el que és essencial. Vull felicitar l'organització per aquest cicle de conferències, perquè activitats d'aquesta mena ens diuen que, malgrat tot, encara hi ha esperança i voluntat per construir un món millor. Salinger comentava que el que em meravella d'un llibre és si quan l'acabes desitges que qui el va escriure fos un amic teu i poguessis telefonar-lo sempre que ho necessitessis. Aquesta és la sensació que sempre em deixa les lectures de Sigmund Bauman. I acabo expressant un desig. Senyor Bauman, quan sigui jove vull ser com vostè. Moltes gràcies.
Well, good evening. May I ask some engineer to give some light here on the audience? I'm used to speak to human beings, not to darkness, so please, I can't see the faces. Giuditta Carrera, my dear friend, brought to my awareness shortly ago that it is 9 years since I have been last time to this wonderful treasury of wisdom and beauty, which is CCCB. I remember it vividly. It was, I think, in the same room when I don't know whether I met with you or with some other people, but nevertheless, it was a memorable event. And I think that whoever comes here to this building and talks to people who work here daily is very unlikely to forget the experience. So I'm very pleased that I have been invited for another time here. And on the other hand, I'm rather ill at ease, I'm feeling, because I wonder whether I will be able, or rather I am sure that I won't be able to raise to the level which was presented by very kind person introducing my speech today, because you are probably, all of you, I understand, I assume, interested in the problems of education, worrying about the problems of education which are confronted now by people, either by teachers, professional teachers, or parents who need to prepare their children to live in the adult society as it is now. So I wonder whether I'm able to say anything about it which you don't know already, which you are not aware of. And I apologize in advance by probably repeating what you already thought through and through in the many, many hours of worry about the educational problems. Even more sorry I am for the fact that I haven't brought you any recipe, just how to get out of the predicament, which you don't find very comfortable. I'm afraid history does not exist until we make it. So, in fact, it will depend eventually on young people who are deeply, bitterly disenchanted at the moment with the benefits they got from educational institution. Sorry, someone entered here. Was it deliberate or by mistake? Somebody in Spanish. So it will eventually depend. It will eventually depend on young people who are present here, what sort of the world they will create and how much better it will be by comparison with the one which we, the old people, have left to them. Well, I repeat what I said before, that to say that the present predicament of education is difficult, to say the least. Well, saying that does not mean bringing news. Everybody is aware of that. And it is not the first time when people worried about the condition of education, when they were critical about it. They thought that not the proper things are done, and things which are done are not done with required, with desirable dedication and well, the basic knowledge which is necessary to act effectively. So the education being in difficult condition is no news. What is new is the depth of the present crisis. education is an institution which accompanied Europe, at least our civilization, of which we are proud, which we cherish. Well, it's accompanied the whole history of it. It was started in ancient Greece, as you probably know, more than 2,500 years ago, very, very long time indeed, in the idea of paideia, in the idea of a master transmitting to a disciple wisdom, knowledge, experience of life, everything which may be useful in future action, in future acting in the grown-up society. The relationship between master and disciple was probably the major idea which created all these educational institutions of which you are aware. Starting from universal primary education to higher education institutions, which are meant for people especially privileged in their knowledge and expertise, all that derived originally from this essential idea of paideia, which was the relationship of transmitting knowledge from people knowing to people still ignorant, but willing to join their ranks. And I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that this basic idea is not tenable any longer. When it was like that, when masters were presiding over the process of ennobling, acquiring knowledge among the younger people around them, they were, so to speak, gatekeepers of knowledge. You couldn't get to knowledge bypassing them. The only road available there was the master. Master, the teacher in the school, the professor in the university, and so on. Now, I suggest that this time is over and unlikely to repeat itself. Whoever is employed as a professional in the educational system faces the competition of infinite amount of sources of knowledge, which are very often much more welcome by the user, much more user-friendly, so to speak, and much more, therefore, sought after than the kind of stiff curriculum which is conveyed by the educational institutions. You can go to any computer shop, even the supermarket, and there are shelves, I am quite sure, containing disks and containing software which brings you updated, the latest information about people's views on this, on that, on everything else, which your teachers who graduated, even if magna cum laude from the university, but was it 20, 30, 40 years ago, are very often blissfully unaware. The easiness with which you obtain access to knowledge it has very interesting effects, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, it brings not to upgrading knowledge, but to downgrading knowledge, to devaluing knowledge. I know it's a very heretical idea, but please think about it and you will see what does it mean, really. That's one of the principal reasons of the wobbling foundations of contemporary education. There was a very interesting thinker in 20th century, Ivan Ilyich, that was his pen name. He was an Austrian, a priest who dedicated the rest of his life to analysis of the cultural problems, cultural inanities, mistakes in contemporary world. And he proposed a very interesting idea that every new development in ideas and in technology, which is the practical arm of ideas, passes through what he called two watersheds. Not excluding education. Education also is subjected to that. What does it mean, two watersheds? First watershed was suddenly opening new opportunities. which didn't exist before. The immediate effects are enormous. It's a really upheaval in the present condition. That is what that happened actually when widely available educational systems, universal schooling, was introduced both during 19th and 20th century. The first effect was enormous. Virtually liquidation of illiteracy and innumeracy, making the printed word and elementary basis of mathematical thinking available to everybody who was eager enough to get it. The impact on the style of life, on the quality of culture, was really far-reaching and clearly for everybody to see. No wonder our predecessors in the 19th century, unlike their descendants like myself in the 21st century, wrote very optimistic books, and they presented history as the progress of wisdom to the detriment of prejudice and superstition and false knowledge and so on, and progress of freedom at the expense of slavery, serfdom, voluntary servitude, and so on. They were full of optimism. 19th century was the optimistic age. Well, then there were disasters, side effects of these new steps taken by civilization, and particularly civilized technology, which filled the 20th century. And finally, we landed now in the apparently peaceful world, leaving behind the centuries-old enmities between nations, between neighbors, and opening tremendous new possibilities among people who enter our world. Now, this second watershed expressed itself in bringing into education the masses of young people which never before, even after the counter illiteracy revolution of 19th century, never before contemplated the possibility of doing just that. There was a period at the end of 20th century, and it is still going on at the moment, when the highest degrees of education depended, it seemed, only to the dedication and talents of individual persons, but otherwise there were no obstacle to getting them. That was the idea of meritocracy, which I don't know whether you still remember. Our culture is a culture of forgetfulness, so we quickly forget what once was a buzzword of society not so far ago. Meritocracy meant that everyone, every person, every man, young man and woman, providing that they have gift from nature or from Almighty, namely talents and strong character and determination to fight the difficulties and so on, can make it, can rise to the top. That was, by the way, you probably noticed that, also a very good excuse for the rising inequality, practical inequality of people in society, because justification of it meant, wow, it's true that society is unequal because people don't have equal talents. Some of them are more gifted than some others, so there is inequality. But the important point is that it does no longer matter where have you been born, what are your material conditions, and so on. If you are among those blessed with gifts of talent and dedication, then you will make it. Under this slogan, which I repeat was a very good excuse for the rising inequality in society, and therefore funded by most of our Western European or general European governments and also the Europe outpost on the other side of the ocean. Now, in the result of that, what has happened? We crossed the second watershed. Second watershed was the fact that the degrees, university degrees, doctorates, Masters of Art, Bachelors of Art, and so fell in value. A few years ago, still, people who got them could be pretty sure that they will get a plum job when they leave the university, well remunerated, satisfying, interesting, fascinating, gratifying, and that will, in fact, last them for the rest of their life. It's a good start which will put them in the right position in society. We have now the first case in modern history when about half or even more than a half of all graduates of higher educational institutions find themselves either unemployed and write endless amount of applications for jobs to which they get no answers even from the companies to which they applied, or otherwise they find themselves in a situation where they are obliged to take jobs much, much below their skills, much, much below their expectations, poorly remunerated, insecure, and having nothing to do with what they prepared themselves to. Overproduction, excess, the enormous effect of the first accretion, adding to the number of educated people in society, and the logic of it, because on the ground of their first successes, it developed until it brought not only the absence of new additions to its value, but also diminishing itself in the value. That happens with everything. Introduction of the new means of transport. Introduction of first cars was tremendous emancipation act. Suddenly, what was far away, you could cover in your own private machine. You could go wherever you wanted. Now, after all these years of development of car industry, according to very careful calculation, we are moving 6 kilometers per hour. If you take into account how much time you have to spend in order to earn money, to buy car, and to buy the petrol, to garage the car, to repair, and so pay taxes, and at the end you are stuck in the very heavy traffic on the road, then if you calculate all it, you are moving, as every pedestrian can do very well, thank you, namely 6 kilometers per hour. So that's another example of this two watersheds rule, which applies to that, and which applies now, ladies and gentlemen, that's what it brings me to, also to the knowledge itself and the information itself. That's a major catastrophe. Well, not catastrophe, it is a catastrophe in disguise because it presents itself as actually a very, very precious gift. Namely, when I was a young person, and that was very long ago, we all were concerned that what stops us from being more effective in changing the world to the better is that we did not have enough knowledge. We need more knowledge, more research, more study, collecting more data, and then we will be wise to do the wise things. Now our major worry, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is such a mass of information that we are completely lost. The major wall separating us, normal human beings, whose brain volume did not grow since times of Adam and Eve, But the same brain is now confronted with the mass of education, which by no means, by no stretch of imagination, it can consume, recycle, and retain. That's a major problem. So what happens in the result? First of all, we are sinking and drowning in the mass of information in which we cannot distinguish between what is relevant and important and what is trifling, stupid, and completely irrelevant. Whenever you type something in your laptop or iPad, asking Google to tell you where to find the answer, you will get on the average 3,500,000 answers, and obviously not even people much younger than me could have no hope that they will consume all that in their lifetime. So the problem is, however, that in this mass of theoretically available information, most of it is rubbish, completely irrelevant to. I was making a study not so far ago, another study about utopia. I printed utopia. I got the usual 3 million answers from Google. I started, of course, I didn't dream about going through all of it, but I started reading at random things, and I got answers about travel agencies, cosmetic surgeries, and which assumed the name of utopia, and they actually figured there in a very, very prominent place. How many there were answers about the real thing, about utopian thinking, and varieties of utopias, their significance in social life, and so on, I can't tell you. I would never know it. I would probably die interstate without knowledge, which in this respect I could pass. The excess of knowledge is now the major obstacle of becoming knowledgeable, to becoming knowledgeable. That is the paradox of our present situation. I will quote you from Thomas Eriksson, very wise researcher of educational issues and contemporary culture in general. What he says, a crucial skill in information society, that's our society, information society which is addicted to information and fell in love with getting it. A crucial skill in information society consists in protecting oneself against the 99% of the information offered that one does not want. That's a very high estimate, 99.99% of information, which is useless. But that is the fact. That is what we are, at least, so we are entitled to expect, because we have really no clear way to find out, to check it, to put it to the test. Well, Eriksson continues, saying that instead of ordering knowledge in tidy rows, information society offers cascades of decontextualized signs, more or less randomly connected to each other. Put differently, he says, when growing amount of information are distributed at growing speed, it becomes increasingly difficult to create narratives, orders, developmental sentences. The fragments threaten to become hegemonic, flow with the equal weight on the surface, but not relating to each other. This has consequences, he says, for the ways we relate to knowledge, work, and lifestyle in a wide sense. Well, result, ladies and gentlemen, is very simple result, overall result of this exponential pace of growth of information is that we feel increasingly, instead of instructed, instead of enlightened, we feel disoriented. How to find our way through all this? Well, what saves us are servers, actually. We transfer the knowledge acquired to servers somewhere in the cloud electronics, in the cloud internet, and don't bother with keeping that in our heads, hoping that when it comes to the crunch, when we need it, we can always obtain it again from this huge warehouse, which we have no idea where it is. But that means that knowledge stored in the warehouse is not working. It's not working. It's lying there in some electronic boxes. It doesn't act. It's not used. It is not part of your life. It is not something which you command immediately whenever you face a situation requiring this kind of knowledge. The result is disorientation, the awareness that there is so much, theoretically speaking, information which I should have possessed, but I don't have. So the feeling, the outcome of that is the feeling of ignorance, which is very humiliating feeling. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another side effect of that, if you are a teacher, you probably experienced the nightmare of students' plagiarism, just taking bits and pieces from websites, putting them in their dissertations and submitting for your evaluation. Now, with excess of knowledge, with knowledge hiding in I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or millions of servers, there is no way even a very, very vigilant teacher could actually spot the fact of plagiarism. You can't read it all. You can't remember it all. There's too much to remember, too much to read. So plagiarism in most cases goes unpunished. So it is not even storing knowledge in servers. It is avoiding acquiring it in the first place. Avoiding acquiring it, you still can make it. You still can go through the educational institution. Disorientation. How to cope with that? Now, that's a very, very big problem to which I don't have, unfortunately, a good answer. I think that in development of digital technology, the art of separating the grain from chaff, as people say, to use the agricultural metaphor, now that is lagging behind. We still don't know how to separate the very few important bits of information from the sea of irrelevant and just accidental. That puts teachers once more in situation without precedent. Another outcome of this development, of this enormous progress of the expected unprecedented pace of the growth of information, is that the old idea of the purpose of schooling is also in trouble. The old idea of schooling was the idea which could be metaphorically described as production of ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles, if you still remember, Second World War, where the missiles just released by ordinary guns. Their trajectory and the length of their hit was fully determined by the direction of the gun and by the amount of powder in setting them in motion. Once and for all, you gave the direction, you gave the power. The rest was already determined by what you have done. In simple words, that meant simply that school was preparation for life, without any adjectives. Life as a whole, life as a whole. Now, ladies and gentlemen, point to me a single thing of which you can be absolutely sure, and tell me with your hand on your heart that it will last you for the rest of your life. Absolutely impossible. Such things are no longer with us. Perhaps some of them will stay with us for the rest of the time. But which ones? Which ones? That's impossible to predict. They change, they are replaced with tremendous speed, Our culture is culture of waste. The distance between being produced, appearing for the first time, and being thrown away to the dustbin, to the rubbish bin, is shortening all the time. People are replacing things, ideas, bits of knowledge, even the technological novelties replace each other with enormous speed. And that means the end of the ballistic missile ideal, rather. What it has to be replaced with, and we are trying, all teachers are trying to do so, is something like smart missile or intelligent missile, as you know from the contemporary military vocabulary. Smart missile is a missile which has the freedom to choose its own targets. You just let it go, and it has sensors of all sorts which allow it to orient itself in constantly changing situation so that the target cannot run away. The missile will reach it and hit it. Another kind of skill it is. It is a skill not on keeping on course, but skill in adjusting the course which you have taken to changing circumstances. In other words, I don't like this word, flexibility. I don't like it because, in my view, when I was younger, people didn't speak about flexibility, but they spoke about spinelessness. Now, I think flexibility is politically correct expression for spinelessness. But this kind of spinelessness of flexibility is nevertheless required. It's nevertheless required in order to just get some secondary or tertiary orientation in this rapidly changing situation. But on the positive side, and I think that is one of the major tasks which is confronted by 21st century educational system, is the passage of one of education to the lifelong education. Lifelong education, refreshing knowledge, as often as thinkable as possible. Well, people who you are training do it, try to do it by themselves, simply by following the developments which are announced, declared, and made available on the internet, on World Wide Web. But again, they are very likely to lose their way among these developments if there are no people more experienced, having wider view, being able to evaluate the new bits of information with better sobriety, so to speak. These people need to help to orient what among the novelties is really worth your embracing and your digesting, and what is rather should be steer clear ahead. But one way or the other, the idea of lifelong education requires a very radical, in fact, I think, restructuring of the educational system. Restructuring in the way of the way in which we think about the scholarly promotion, academic promotion in the universities, restructuring the way in which students are separated from the rest of the occupation. Perhaps the ideal would be transformation of the population as such into part-time students and overcoming the boundary between the two. Well, it sounds like utopia. I'm using again this beautiful word. It sounds like utopia, particularly in times of austerity, when you hear that about cuts, and education, of course, is one of the first victims of that. So thinking about future of the young generation, about many, many years ahead, about the kind of preparation, readiness, which we leave as inheritance to our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren not yet born. Now, it's not a good time for governments under the pressure of IMF, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, stock exchanges, all forces of this world as if plotting, conspiring together against serious speaking about reform of education. On the contrary, as you probably know, you heard or you haven't heard about Bologna document, Bologna, in which the desirable position taken to the rest of society by the universities was codified in a sense. Now, what was the recipe which Bologna document contained for the troubles we now experience? Well, the recipe was university should get in more close, intimate link with business and markets, which should be guided by the market demand, should be guided by the business interests. Business interests have, as you know, this invisible hand which puts everything to order. And somehow it will put to order also education. Now, the whole nonsense of this recommendation is the fact that to get away from the present uncertainty of educational institutions, we are advised to get more uncertainty rather than less, because our contemporary uncertainty is caused in the last instance, in the ultimate account, is caused precisely by the vagaries of the deregulated market. And now this deregulated market should cure education from its present uncertainty. Well, that's really a very inane kind of concept. So I am pretty aware what needs to be done, but at the same time, I am sadly also aware that making it into flesh, the word into flesh, under present circumstances is particularly difficult. I am also, ladies and gentlemen, that is the last point I would like to make to you, because I think that there will be questions and answers later. What to do with the present generation of students and graduates of universities, young people who enter now the world which feels, if you are not, because I see young people here, so perhaps they will confirm my guess, but if I see older than young people, a little bit older, so I ask you to imagine that you are younger, well, the world feels like inhospitable. We are not needed, we are not in demand. No one asks us, no one welcomes us as the gift from heaven, you know, young people full of enthusiasm, full of strength, joined us to help us to make life a little bit better. Now what the contrary is reaction. Everybody is concerned. Oh, wow, my God, so many unemployed among them. How much money it costs. There are hordes of accountants to calculate it, where the cut needs to be done, and so on and so on. Unwelcome guest. And that's very offensive, very offending feeling. What are the results of that? Well, it's too early to judge. Phenomenon is really new. Well, it appeared in our awareness, if not in reality, but in our awareness, it appeared after the recent credit collapse, the end of the 30 years of very, very misleading, very deceitful, putative well-being, which we enjoyed, if you still remember what was there. But the collapse of credit showed us right away, suddenly, unexpectedly, in a very painful fashion, that we enjoyed the 30 years of consumerist orgy by spending money which we did not earn. And not only our money, but we spend also the money which our children have not started yet earning. And we spent also, I am afraid, money of our grandchildren who haven't been yet born, but they are already in debt, having to repay the tremendous amount of resources which were eaten up by this episode, 30 years of long episode of living on credit, being deceived by the offers of available for everybody credit cards, by availability of banking loans, and constant declaration of consolation. Don't worry going into debt, because the value of your property is rising. It will go on rising infinitely. So when it comes to repayment, you will easily repay your debts without feeling any difficulty. All that appeared to be illusion. But from beneath the ruins of this illusion, we are seeing social realities which emerge from underneath. Tremendously growing inequality, social inequality in the world and inside our own societies. The situation in which the rich, very rich, the very, very rich, the very, very, very rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The bankruptcy of the expectation that the well-being, that the richness of the few will benefit us all. It doesn't work at all. I don't know whether you have noticed that of the whole additional value which have been produced in the United States after the credit collapse, since then, of all that new wealth produced in American society, 93% has been appropriated by 1% of the richest Americans. And all the rest of American society had to satisfy themselves in dividing the remaining 7% of extra wealth. Now that's the situation which emerges. And that, for older people, it is, I suggest, slightly less shocking than for the young. Why? Because we had crises in our past. Each one of us probably had some period when unemployment struck very close to his own person, or very close, or inside his family. Some times of apparently growing well-being, and other times when it went down, fears, and so on. So we developed some sort of experience, so to speak, a second line of trenches. We know how to behave when the situation is unprepossessing and threatening. But the young people were brought up in conviction that the point of well-being, of welfare, to which their parents brought them, is for them the starting point. They will go up, they will go further. That's just the starting point. They will do better than their parents are. And suddenly they found themselves in the situation where the real problem which they are confronting is how not to lose the position, the well-being, the degree of welfare which their parents or their grandparents with hard work managed to create. Reactions to that discovery, I told already a moment ago, it's very difficult to give for the absence yet of a sufficiently long time to spot the genuine tendencies. But as it seems, I'm telling it to you very tentatively, I can't be sure that that is the final assessment of the situation. Well, what seems to be possible answers of the younger generation to this situation? Well, one thing most obvious, and that is already the signs of it is already discernible, the experience of older brothers disparaged, degraded, devalued the quality of educational institutions, educational diploma in the eyes of the younger brothers. They see how their older brother, I speak metaphorically, it could be an older friend, older neighbor, or whatever. They see how after all this very, very hard work, 3, 4 years, 5 years of university education, they still are going without job or perform a very rubbishy kind of jobs. And so they don't trust it. On the other hand, the multi-billionaires, I wonder whether you noticed that, all multi-billionaires who made the highlights, who appear on the first pages of glossy magazines, on first pages of daily newspapers, all of them, Stephen Jobs, and starting from Stephen Jobs and ending with Mark Zuckerberg, all these new multi-billionaires, they were all, without a single exception, dropouts from the education. They never finished on the degree. At some point, they decided they came across one very wise idea, and what for? They did diplomas. They can do much better like that. That's one of the possible reactions. Again, misleading, because how many Mark Zuckerbergs are still possible after Facebook already acquired the first billion of regular users and well, conquered the market, so to speak. So there's no much room there for such miracles, but it may mislead quite a number of young people. What for? Let us have a shortcut. Go straight to business, straight to, there are people whom I know personally who just believe that they will be the great singers or musicians in general, or great painters, and they are just producing blogs on websites, blog, or even send Twitters, and hope that someone, a very powerful patron of arts, or patron of music, will spot them, the rising talents, and pick them up from the oblivion, from the nowhere being. That's one possibility. But I'm afraid that there is a wider impact of this new experience. There are symptoms, quite convincing ones, of the retreat of quite many of young people from engagement in public life. There are more and more people who don't believe any longer in joining forces in the benefits which may bring active engagement, action in public life, and effort to make it better than it used to be. I call it hunter's strategy. Hunter strategy, as distinct from gardening strategy. In gardening, you take responsibility for the well-being, for the order, harmony of the plot of land in which you cultivate your garden, right? It's your responsibility. You presume that if you don't put your effort into it, there will be wilderness and chaos. So it makes you a very important person in the world. Hunter strategy is different. What you are caring for is just to fill your hunting bag to the limit. And you don't care how many game will be left in the result of the successful hunting in the woods. It is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to get as much as you can from this huge container of gifts, desirable gifts, which the world seems to be like. Well, it is like abandoning the idea of good society completely as hopeless idea, as not likely to be ever put into practice, and take care only on cutting out a very small niche, a relatively more comfortable, more convenient, more cozy than the rest of the world, abandoned to its not very encouraging state. But there is a possibility of contrary, exactly the opposite reaction to the situation. More engagement in the job of improving the world. Understanding, more profound understanding that there is a very close link between personal self-interest and the condition of society. That as Aristotle discovered more than 2,000 years ago, one can be a good human only in a good society. Well, there's a chance of rediscovering this very, very old truth. But, and that's a very big but, it won't be manifested, if it comes to be, it won't be manifested in more engagement in the existing political system. We have signs all over the place that the youngsters look alternative ways of engaging in public activity. Different, alternative. Why? Because the crisis of political system is different from the crisis which we remember from the near past. Previously, one spoke about political crisis when one party, ruling party, lost its advantage and gave way to its opponents. That was political crisis. But political crisis today is different in the sense that it's not crisis of one or another party. All of them are perceived as inept to act properly. All of them are perceived as simply hapless, deprived of power, of strength to deliver on the promise. And more often, all of them, like here in Spain as well, suspected of corruption, of immorality in performing their public function. So people don't look with hope towards the existing political system. Something must be wrong. It is not just, ladies and gentlemen, crisis of one or another political party or one or another political camp. It is the crisis of democracy. The representative democracy does not work as it was hoped it will. And the signs which you see all around, like in Movimiento Los Indignados, for example, here in Spain, young people look for alternative ways of making influence, impact on the state of affairs, or meeting with wide angle, the existing situation, the existing institutions. Well, whether it will work or not, I am not a prophet, I cannot tell you. What I'm sure of is that we will never be certain whether it is right or wrong unless we try. The trial is the only test of it. I'm quite sure that we are, well, for a short time, because I'm a very old man, but most of you are just cast into a situation in which you are condemned to live in a very interesting time. Very interesting time in which a very lot of things will happen, and in which you will have really lift your sleeves and get to work making history more friendly for the user. Thank you.
Bé, moltes gràcies, professor Bauman. Ara obriríem un torn de debat, de preguntes. Dues cosetes. Una és que intenteu fer preguntes breus i concretes, i la segona és que a les 9:10 hem d'acabar, o sigui que tenim just una mitja horeta per poder parlar amb el professor Bauman sobre tot el que penseu que és oportú parlar. Si algú vol parlar, que aixequi la mà.
Hola, buenas noches. Gracias, profesor, por la ponencia. La pregunta concreta es, ¿cuál sería el papel de la educación en humanidades y ciencias sociales en el estado actual de la educación?
You are asking about social sciences, humanities, what they can do. Well, quite a lot, I would say. From my own professional standpoint, I'm a sociologist. If you fail to notice, I'm not sure whether I'm a good sociologist, but I am a sociologist by profession. I don't have any other. And I actually welcome this situation as a sociologist. I think that at no time in my memory, and I am dabbling in sociology already more than 60 years, quite a long time, I encountered such fascinating tasks opened in front of sociology, and also some great social demand for the services which sociologists are able to deliver. What I have in mind is the following. To be very brief, I would only mention the fact that for the first part and a very long part of its history, sociologists were serving the managerial reason. The solid modernity, which was the first stage of modern times, was all about bringing an order to chaos. Thus, the making people, instilling people, encouraging people, convincing people, if necessary, enforcing people to do what otherwise they wouldn't do. Talcott Parsons, once upon a time a guru of the worldwide sociology, pointed out that all what sociology is about is to explain how, in spite of free will, we are all voluntary subjects, we have free will. In spite of that, there is a pattern and order in human behavior. Now, that's exactly what the manager wanted to hear, and sociology made its career by becoming what I call science of unfreedom. How, despite the free will, make humans unfree, right? And follow the routine, follow the command, follow the order codified for a military barrack, for a factory, for a hospital, for a school, university or any other organized entity. To that, I would like to add now that this managerial reason is nowhere in existence any longer. Managers, contemporary managers, are not particularly enjoying the prospect of managing, and they are very, very glad to hire off, contract out, subsidiarize, as they call, the functioning, managerial function to the managed persons themselves. It is not manager who is now responsible for the results of the firm, of the company. On the contrary, manager who spoiled things very, very radically is leaving the company with golden handshake. But who is responsible are the ordinary officials, ordinary workers who have to prove to the manager that when it comes to next round of redundancies, it's not him who will be made redundant, but his mate, somebody else. So there's a competition between the managed objects which replaces the managerial reason of the past. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are all now individuals, not only from the point of view of the changing managerial reason, but also from the point of view of the changing scheme of life, mode of life in our society. We are all individuals by decree, in the sense that if you fail, you have no one to voice a grudge against. You are bearing full responsibility for your defeat. It is all ascribed to your personal leniency, your personal lack of determination, lack of knowledge, negligent work, and things like that. What is not shown clearly to you, and you can't discover it on your own, is the very complex mechanism of mutual dependencies, of chains of command, which are hiding from the area of your immediate seeing or your immediate viewing. You need to orient yourself how this complex world of ours works in order to really become an individual not just de jure, not just by decree, but individual de facto, namely a person who is able to self-assert and be in control of his own life. I am not saying that the knowledge which sociologists have about how this world of ours works will guarantee your success in transformation from individual de jure into individual de facto. But it will help. It is really necessary, indispensable for making that important step. So to sum it up, I would say that sociology has now moved from serving managerial reason to serving the ordinary people reason, the ordinary people like you and me. Just the artists of life, as I describe them in my little book under the same title. And second, what I may put in summary is that sociology has a chance of moving from science of unfreedom into the science of freedom. And for me, at least, it is very exhilarating and encouraging prospect, and I only regret that I won't do much in this direction any longer.
Aquí, aquest senyor d'aquí. Aixeca la mà, que et vegin.
Hola, bona tarda i moltes gràcies per la seva conferència. No? És un plaer escoltar-lo i aprendre. Jo li volia fer una pregunta ràpida. A veure, degut a la desesperació de la gent que no troba respostes, vostè creu que Europa pot tornar al feixisme, no com el feixisme dels anys 20 o 30, no? Però constatem que a tota Europa l'extrema dreta està pujant de vots i molta gent treballadora està votant el feixisme, no? Podeu donar volta del feixisme en els valors? Si és possible, si la gent no troba una resposta per l'esquerra a aquesta crisi del capitalisme. Gràcies.
Well, one cannot exclude the possibility, it's a real possibility, but fascism is not the only one threat which is on the horizon. Professor Kania, who sits here, who came to visit Barcelona with me, wrote a very interesting study about comparing neoliberal standpoint with the modern populism, discovering very, very critical developments in both attitudes. There are some people, Richard Serret, for example, who is preparing to say that neoliberalism is already bankrupt. It is the dead-end ideology, still believed in by very, very people, but leading nowhere, already bankrupt, already over. There's a danger of populism much more widespread than the danger of fascism, but also not promising repairing the misfunctions and shortcomings of the existing social process. Now, all these dangers have one common denominator, I would say. They want to reduce complexity of every step we are likely to take, to reduce that to a single answer. You yourself preceded your questioning by saying, I'll give you one short, easy question, right? Now, we are longing for short and easy answers. We are all long. There's no question. It's human weakness. When you live in devilishly complicated world, which you can't understand properly, you dream about simplification. Just one factor, enough to be pulled in order to change all the negative aspects of existing world. Unfortunately, there is no such one factor. Every action has a reaction, and every step which you are taking, apart from beneficial consequences, is full with risks. It may bring unanticipated consequences which will be not to your taste. I live through domination of many ideologies in my life, and one thing repeated invariably in history of all these passing ideologies, namely, when they were successful, that was the moment of their bankruptcy. Because when they were successful, the moment when successful, the distance between what they promised and what actually emerged out of it became clear. But we cannot, that's our, again, human weakness. It's very difficult for us to predict in advance the discrepancy between the target formulated, the objective formulated, and the results of it when they are fulfilled. We can't do it. And therefore, after every victory of every revolution in history, we become very sorry that it happened in the first place. And that is probably also the prospect for the future. I can't tell you which of these ideologies at present threatening are the worst, right? Probably all of them are worst. But I would say that what makes them all worst is that they all cater to the very unsavory desire for simplified answers to very complex situations in which we find ourselves. I'm terribly sorry to sound conceited, but I would say that my fellow sociologists are the only ones I know who prefer to making the familiar unfamiliar, to making the simple complex than the other way around.
Gracias. Gracias por su charla, sobre todo las palabras finales de esperanza por crearmos una nueva democracia y una nueva solución. Y mi pregunta está más o menos en eso. ¿Cómo ves cómo hay una conexión mayor, aunque haya mucha información con la Internet y la gente se queda un poco confusa? Hay una posibilidad de conexión y colaboración entre las personas y de intervención también en los medios de comunicación y la manera como la verdad o la sociedad establece las normas, ¿no? Eso, quería preguntar, ¿cómo ves esa posibilidad de colaboración de un punto más conceptual y humanístico mesmo? Si salimos de una época neoliberal individualista, estamos entrando en una era de colaboración que no sea el modelo antiguo de comunismo, pero que sea una colaboración de las personas en pro de un mundo mejor para todos, ¿no?
Yes, we are all under the tremendous impression which introduction of digital information, access to computers, access to World Wide Web, and even the storage of information in servers did in our life. We are all aware of that. Particularly not present-day children. They are still not aware about the revolution committed because they can't imagine the world without Facebook. So they don't remember such a world. And they are asking, probably some of you were asked by your children, tell me, Dad, tell me, Mommy, what have you been doing when there was no Facebook? As much as I was asked by my children, what did you do in the evening when there was no television? Well, but all the other persons who lived through this revolution know how big is the impact. But, and that's a very big but, again, that's a question of long experience, historical experience, the more radical is change, the more you are inclined to believe in its miraculous power and ascribe to it the tremendous, tremendous consequences. After all, what is developing, ladies and gentlemen, is tools, instruments, not the purpose for which we are applying them. And assuming that new technology will bring salvation to humanity is to believe in something which is very wrong theory, namely technological determinism. Technology will do what we humans fail to do. But technology doesn't do anything which we humans tell it to do, design it to do, and determine it to do. So again, responsibility comes back to our garden. Only we quiet down our doubts somehow by pointing out, I sent 500 Twitters today. I am very politically active, politically engaged, and I am in the course of changing the world, without, of course, any knowledge what effect these Twitters had. Look, Hillary Clinton, very responsible person, mind you, very wise woman, the Secretary of State in the United States of America for many years, when there was a first Movimiento Los Indignados in Tehran after falsified elections of the present president of Iran, and people went to the street to protest. Hillary Clinton said, in a moment of enthusiasm, we are living during the first democratic revolution committed by internet. That is the first Twitter revolution. And Georgy Morozov, a very clever young Russian, emigrated to America to study political sciences. He calculated, he found out that when she said this word, when these events in Tehran happened, there were 69 people in the whole of Iran who had access to Twitter. So this, which clearly the revolution, the Iranian failed revolution, to be sure, could not be caused by Twitter. It was caused by very old-fashioned ways, like knocking to the door of your neighbor or taking telephones and phoning, come tomorrow to the public place, and so on and so on. It is not the question of tools. It is a question of what we do with the tools. And in my view, one of the possible negative impact of these new, allegedly wonderful, miraculous tools, which are ready to take over the whole burden of making history from our own shoulder, put on themselves, one of the negative effects may be the false security. In good faith, people may convince themselves, what do you want from me? I am very active. I spend 5 hours a day in front of computer and send Twitters and send messages. I am doing everything. Well, of course, very hard work, but is it the work which is really needed, work on changing society? All research, ladies and gentlemen, of how actually internet communication works is that it is not only uniting certain group of like-minders, but also separating, dividing people who don't like each other's ideas. It is very easy in using internet to make your new friends. You can, if you wish, if you try hard enough, make them 500 in a day. That means more than I have managed to do in 88 years of my life. But you can do it now, but equally easily, with equal comfort. You can separate yourself by cutting out, never seeing a particular website, not making an effort to read it. Separate yourself from any other alternative, just to enclose yourself into your own network and close your mind to everything else. I mentioned already Richard Sennett. Richard Sennett, this time very positively, because he produced, in my view, the best I so far encountered recipe for contemporary humanism. Relatively easy to master recipe, tripartite recipe. I repeat, first part, formal, second, open, third, cooperation. Formal, open, cooperation. What does it mean? Formal. Informal. What's happening to it? Informal, open cooperation. What does it mean informal? No rules of procedure are set in advance. You don't enter communication with the idea that everybody must follow the way of proceeding with which you came to it. You have to leave to the cooperation itself the role in creating rules of cooperation as they emerge during the practical cooperation. Informality. Second, openness. Openness means that we are speaking about education, so in educational language, it would mean that everybody enters cooperation, agreeing to play the role at the same time of a teacher and a pupil. Teacher and pupil. Which means that you assume in advance that it is not by any means certain that you are in the right and they are in the wrong. It may come out quite the contrary, that you are in the wrong and they are in the right. Open yourself to arguments which come to the cooperation with the wish to teach as much as to learn, You assume that there is much to learn. You assume that other participants are fully fledged subjects and they have something to offer you. And in the end, cooperation rather than conversation, dialogue, or debate. Because in a normal debate, you know what is involved, what is motivating people in normal debate. When you have a seminar debate, for example, in an average university, what you confront there is people coming to a seminar in order to convince other people or force them to accept that they are wise and they, the listeners, are stupid. So ordinary debate is about showing who is the winner, who is the defeated, who is the failure. Now, in cooperation, it is the other way around. There are no winners and no defeated. No winners, no defeated. Everyone emerges from cooperation enriched, richer in wisdom, richer in experience, richer in horizons than he entered. Because each one of us, a member of every group, of every category, of every network, of every nation, of every locality, has unrepeatable, unique experience which other comparable categories don't have, or individuals. So everybody can gain something from informal, open cooperation. Now, the big question, and I leave it to you to answer, is whether technological tools, which we got in internet, whether Facebook or a similar social websites, so-called, are able to apply the strategy of informal, open cooperation. I personally doubt it, but we have no time to discuss it in depth, so you have to resolve the issue.
Bé, em sembla que no tenim més temps per una nova pregunta. Moltes gràcies, professor Bauman, per les seves paraules. Moltes gràcies a tots vostès per l'estona passada aquí en companyia i felicitats al CCCB per l'organització d'aquests debats. Bona nit.